Hey everyone, it's Helen Castillo again, and we have an awesome tutorial for you guys today. So right here I've got two cotton fabrics. I have a cotton poplin, which has a tie-dye print, and the beauty of it is that it is not even a little bit pixelated, so it looks super duper real, like as if it was actually tie-dyed. This is style number 330785. It's a little bit on the lightweight side, so I'm going to use this as a lining for the zipper pouch that I'm going to show you how to make today. I also have this amazing fabric that again has that kind of faux dyed effect. It almost looks like if you left a pen in like the pocket of a suit or something and it kind of dripped through. This is item number 330813. It is mood exclusive green nebulous luminescence, which is super cool. I bought this actually to make a suit out of, so I'm really stoked on that. So let's get started. I also have a cute, awesome zipper here. It's got metal teeth, so this is a little trickier to resize. I'm not going to resize it at all. And just some food for thought, the length of the zipper is actually the length of the teeth. So that would mean that the finished size of my zipper pouch would be 6 inches wide. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we cut the actual fabric into those sizes. I actually love this tool. This is a blue Choco liner, and what this does is it has the kind of like the dust, chalk dust inside of it. I'm not going to open it, but you can open these and refill them. And what it lets you do is, I have this bad habit of just like trying things out onto fabric. You can just draw into place whatever you'll be using as your final. It's really tricky though, because with these you have to be careful what color you're using on what color fabric, because for the most part they do not disappear 100%. You can always try rubbing same fabrics together to remove it, but they are semi-permanent. So try to make sure when you're using the Choco liners that you are very conscientious of what color you're using on what color fabrics, and they come with a cap, so you don't have to worry about that opening and staining anything important. I've got a see-through ruler here, and I also have some presser feet. I've got the basic presser foot, which is also known as the zigzag. See, it's got that wide opening, so you can use the zigzag stitch or the straight stitch by aligning the needle down the center. And this is a zipper foot. This type of zipper foot is my personal preference because when you're doing a zipper, you just kind of sit right into that ledge with the teeth, and you would just remove this, clip it in on either side depending on what side of the zipper you are sewing. I also have some tailor's chalk, so if you prefer this type versus the Choco liner, it's a little harder to keep these edges nice and sharp, if you will. So usually I would use like a scissor edge and then wipe that clean, just so I can get a really, really nice crispy edge with that. Thread to match. It's matching my outer fabric because I'll be doing top stitching after I put my zipper in. So let's set these tools aside and get started. I am going to use the zipper as kind of like my jumping off point for the width, and we're going to keep our seam allowances at 3/8 of an inch. 3/8 of an inch is used because it is very similar to 1 centimeter when we're talking metric measurements versus standard that we use in the US. So at the very end of this zipper stop, I am going to mark 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and at the top ends as well. So I'm not going to trim anything away. I don't want any fraying or unraveling. Just going to mark 3/8 on that side and 3/8 on this side. And you can use any fabrics you want. I'm also going to show you how to do French seams with this. So you can make a 1, 2, 3 pouch in honestly probably under 10 or 15 minutes. And although this is a very narrow zipper, I think it's cute because you can hide you know, personal items, your phone, your wallet. You can put your machine feet in it. Anything, any small tools you just want to tuck away, or you just want to try out a zipper pouch. So I am going to use this cotton sateen. It's got a little stretch, which is okay. You don't want to use anything that's too super duper stretchy because then that's going to work against you. But what I'm going to use, and I'm not making patterns for this, I'm just going to work off the dimensions for my zipper using that mark for my 3/8 of an inch seam allowance on either side. And then I will use my rotary cutter to get exactly what I want. But I don't want to accidentally keep my selvage edge in there. Although that's kind of cool. Maybe you could use that as kind of a detail for your finished garment or finished project. So now that we have that cleaned up, my pattern, if you will be 6 3/4 of an inch wide. And this would be an instance I could use my Choco liner just to mark that off. Make it 11 inches. And I just aligned my 2 rulers here to give myself a 90-degree angle, and that turned out pretty good, pretty straight. I will just come across with the rotary cutter. So it's a shorty, but it's all good. It's just to hold some personal items. Again, your zipper size can dictate the width of this. And now that I have my outer piece cut, it's about a 1/16 of an inch off on the top edge. Better to be safe than sorry. So now that is cleaned up, and you can see there my edging on my rotary mat. So now I'm going to cut my lining. So I'm just going to lay my outer fabric right over top of my lining. I'll use some pattern weights here. And then I can just use the rotary blade. Here are my shell and my lining pieces. So first things first, I can always crop away at that extension because that I do not need. But I'm going to leave that in place just as a placeholder. Just double check that the width is correct between my zipper and myself and my lining piece. Perfect. So next step, I'm going to lay these pieces wrong sides together. And you're probably thinking that's crazy, that can't be right. But we're doing French seams on this, so it is 100% good to go. So I'm just going to pin along the perimeter. This is actually double-sided fusible, so you could cut a piece of this to be the same exact size as your self and lining piece, and then you can fuse the 2 pieces together. Instead, I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to do that frame stitch, which is going to end up being hidden in my French seam. For the frame stitch itself, you can use the zipper foot, so I'm going to put this on my machine because I feel like it's going to give me a lot more control with getting very, very, very close to that edge. And our seam allowance for the overall project is 3/8 of an inch. So that means when we do the French seam, we have to be sure that we catch that 1/8. So I'm going to run to the machine. I'm going to do that 1/8 of an inch frame stitch, and then we will put the zipper in. First thing is first, when you put your zipper foot on the machine, you have to be sure that you adjust the width of your machine. So when you turn that width dial, it moves that needle left and right on the machine. You also have to be sure that you are on the straight stitch setting on your machine as well, because if your needle is too far over to one side, you will break your needle, you will jam your machine, and nobody wants that. So what we have to do is we have to center position, and what you can do, you can hold your 2 threads. You want that needle to fall straight down the center of the opening of the side of the zipper foot you are using. And I have my stitch length on a 3, my width on a 2. It doesn't matter what your width is because we're not doing zigzag, but that just so happens to be the position of the width dial that I need my machine on. My tension is at about a 3 and change, and these fabrics are not heavyweight, so I'm not too concerned with adjusting the tension, but be sure you know, everybody's machine is different, so just double check, like with a scrap bit of fabric first on what settings you have to create, or use rather. For a frame stitch, you can actually do a really long length of a stitch because it's just a placeholder. You don't have to do a back tack necessarily. So I'm just doing about a 1/16 of an inch seam allowance, so I can just baste these two pieces together. I'm gonna lift and pivot as I get to my corners. I did not back tack because this is not a final stitch. I don't have to worry about taking it out, or, you know, it will become hidden in my final piece. So I'm going to change that length back to a 3. This is my narrow side of my bag. And you can use your Wonder clips for this. I'm actually going to go a step further, and I'm going to clip a notch to indicate that 3/8 of an inch, because I will be only seeing the wrong side of the zipper when I'm attaching that. So I'm just clipping a notch, that 3/8, and a notch, and another notch. I'm going to place the teeth side to be face down on the outside of my fabric. Align my notch there. And then I'll grab my Wonder clips, which are literally the best invention. I mean, when you go to design school, they don't show you any of these home sewing tools, which I think should be illegal because they make your life so much easier. That is one side of the zipper. So I have the right side of the zipper facing the right side of my fabric, and I'm just gonna run that right into my machine. We'll do a 1/4 inch seam allowance for this zipper. It's not gonna make or break anything, but if this is the first zipper that you're doing, you wanna be like extra safe. When I get closer to the zipper head, I'm gonna drop my needle, and please do not ever turn your hand wheel backwards. It will undo the last stitch that you did. I'm only turning it backwards a hair so that I can just have the tip of that needle in the fabric. So I can lift this foot and pull the zipper head toward the back of what I've already sewn. Then you can drop your foot again and continue sewing at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure your notched edge stays at the very edge of the raw part of your fabric. And then you can back tack. Now I have my zipper in place, and that is the right side. So what you can do if you want to jump into that next step is you'll do a top stitch. You can do it before or after you attach the opposite side of the zipper. So I'm just giving this like a finger press. Just have to adjust my needle a hair so that it is more on the right side, or the inside of that foot. And then I'm going to do an 1/8 of an inch top stitch. So there she is. So we're going to take this side of the bag, the right side, and bring it up to the other right side of the zipper tape. And then I'm going to align my notches. So align that notch with this raw edge, align this notch with this raw edge, and then I will attach those at the same seam allowance as before, that 1/4 inch seam allowance here. I'm gonna use my Wonder clips again, and I'm just gonna clip that zipper tape into place. Make sure that my notch aligns with the other raw edge of my fabric. I need to swap my presser foot back over to the opposite side and adjust the width dial so that my needle is falling dead center into that opening. Now I will sew 1/4 inch seam allowance for the opposite side of the zipper tape. Now we've attached the zipper. You have a lining side on the outside and the right side on the inside. If you want to, you can double check what that looks like by flipping this right side out. And we have one more step before we close the bag up with the French seam. So what I have to do yet is I have to do my top stitching on the part of the zipper that I just sewed. We'll talk a little bit more about how we're going to join this zipper tape together so that the zipper stays kind of tight. What you can do is you can actually hand tack that, or you can do it by machine. But remember that the feed dogs are going to push those pieces away from each other. So instead, I'm going to save myself some trouble, and I'm going to do a little hand baste to keep that zipper tape closed. And since I'm past my seam allowance, just using a contrast thread because no one will see it. We'll actually end up removing that shortly. And just be sure you keep your 3/8 of an inch aligned. But what this is going to do, it's going to be a placeholder for you when you go to the machine and close up that seam. When we do close this up, we have to be super conscientious of where those stoppers are so we don't break the needle in the machine. I am going to run back to the machine now and do that top stitching on this side. You can do the top stitching before you close this shut by hand if you feel. Top stitching on either side of the zipper. Just be sure you don't get any threads caught in there. And you can use any type of zipper. An invisible zipper would probably be much easier, but a lot less fun looking. Oh wow, look. That's almost continuous. That's so cool. That wasn't even on purpose. I'm gonna put a stitch in here to kind of lock my zipper tape in place. So you're gonna think I'm crazy, but it's definitely going to help us in the long run. And since I already have that little stitch in there that I did by hand, that will help me too. So I'm just going to walk this. I'm going to unzip this a hair. I can actually trim these little extensions off now. We don't need them anymore. The next step of your zipper pouch is to choose the location that you want the zipper to be sitting. So if you want it to be sitting closer to the top, and then you have a little bit more space to fill, that will end up being your final location for the zipper. I'm gonna grab some of my Wonder clips, and I'm gonna clip along this side seam allowance and be sure that I keep those raw edges right on top of one another. So now we're going to start with the French seams. We only have 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, so the first set of stitching that I do on the right side is going to be 1/8, because then I have to encapsulate all of that when I flip this to be the wrong side out with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So bear in mind, you're taking about 1/3 of your seam allowance to do the first set of stitching. So that is seam number 1. Now I'm going to do the opposite side with the same 1/8 of an inch. technically the pouch is closed. You could even close either side with bias tape and just call it a day and it would be finished. But with French seams, now that we have that 1/8 of an inch, I have to flip the whole bag to be inside out. Be sure you keep your zipper open at least 2/3 of the way. And before we flip this, what you're gonna do is, I know it's a very, very, very tight corner there, but you are going to clip at a 45-degree angle so we can get that excess to come away. Now you can flip your bag. You really want to push those corners out. I'm just going to use my scissor. I probably shouldn't, so just please be careful. Don't push too hard because you will put a hole in your bag, and clip that. So you're really going to have to roll those seams because we have to catch that 1/8 seam allowance into our new seam allowance, our official finished French seam. Because on the right side, on the outside of our pouch, we want to be sure that we really get all of that nice and crispy. So I didn't cut this top corner because I was afraid my zipper was so close to the top edge that I didn't want to take a risk with clipping it, but I am going to get crazy. I'm going to clip that also. Flip that. And just push it out with my fingernail. And we want to be sure that this side stays nice and flat because what we do next is going to determine what it's going to look like on the outside of the pouch. So that's a very, very, very tight stitch in there, and it's going to get bulky. So just be prepared. If you want to, even we can trim a bit of that zipper tape away so it's not too bulky. And you can even run to the ironing board and press that out. And just put a Wonder clip in place just to get everything nice and flat. So really roll that, clip it, and then the opposite side, clip that away. Any extra threads you can clip as well. You don't want any mess in there. I'm gonna just pull my zipper closed a little bit so I don't get too much bulk. There she is. So now we're going to do the 1/4 inch seam allowance on either side of the bag from the wrong side. And then we're finished with our zipper pouch. So there she is, 1/4 inch seam allowance. And we just have to pray that I caught all of the first step's worth of that French seam. So I'm going to do the same step for the opposite side. So there she is. Inside out, that is our lining. I'm just going to pull all these ugly doohickeys out, and I will flip her to be right side out. And just be sure your zipper is unzipped when you get to this step because you don't want to get stuck without being able to flip it right side out. But there you have it. And I am 99% sure that if I pressed this, it would lay a lot nicer and flatter. But that turned out pretty cute. Yeah, once I hit that with the iron, she is good to go. So that is the French seam. You cannot see the original. I've got a few little fuzzies here. They're probably just loose threads from all of that quick sewing. Just some loose fibers too. You can just trim those away. For the most part, it looks very clean with the French seam. And I like the pop from the lining. So get crazy. Put all my little, wow, It's official. She is my Wonder Clip bag. Good luck and tag us in your results.